example is what happens in like Rinzai and Pure Land Buddhism, where it is the here and now that is the all and the nothing. But something like because we mentioned Hegel's reading of Zeno's paradox of motion of the flying arrow, that the flying arrow at any given moment is at rest. Do you think that that points to any sort of valid actual contradiction, or is that some sort of obfuscation of term or apparent contradiction and not real contradiction? Because if there is some sort of real contradiction in the everyday present, that may sort of mirror some of the what we see as the transcendent paradox. What's your thoughts?
But like something like Xenos Paradox with the arrow, or I mean, I think that Xenos. I mean, I think those are apparent paradoxes, and I think that part of the reason why they were insoluble at that time was they didn't have calculus. They just didn't have a way of talking about the approach to a limit. And I think when we talk about something like motion, right, that it's talking about motion using effectively geometric, one-dimensional way of talking about motion as it happening at a discrete moment in time. I think it's just a misunderstanding, or either a misunderstanding or a misapplication of thinking about motion. And I think that with calculus, we can the arrow you can cross the halfway point, right? I don't think that. I think those are apparent contradictions. I don't think that they're real.
Okay, interesting. I don't know my calculus well enough to push back on that point, but I'll just leave this as an open question. From the research that I was doing, it seemed that the great majority of Zeno's paradoxes could be solved by the approximations made by calculus, and in their better understanding of space and whatnot. But from what I was reading, that specifically the paradox of the arrow is actually not solved by calculus, but something which I'm not qualified to.
Right, and again, I think it just comes to I think it's calculus plus a different understanding of what time is, right? I think that we also now have a completely different understanding of what time is. Time is a relationship with time and space are about how they warp one another. So we have a totally different understanding of what space and time are. So I don't think that they're not metaphysical or physical contradictions. They're contradictions that certainly exist if you live in one-dimensional space and time happens in discrete units or something. Which I think there's every reason to believe that it doesn't work that way. That was a misunderstanding, a clever misunderstanding, but a misunderstanding. Let me say also just one other thing before we move on. When you think about this whole logical business, there's a third option here that we haven't talked about that's worth thinking about, and it comes out, of course, out of the scholastic tradition, right? Is that someone like Thomas Aquinas is going to say, look, he's not going to go down the road of someone like Duns Scotus and say that the propositions we use to describe human beings or the world and those that describe God are the same, right? So when I say that you're a wise person, and I say, does God describe God as being wise? Someone like Scotus is going to say we're using wisdom in a univocal sense, right? That wisdom, the same wisdom you have, is the exact same wisdom that God has. God just has a whole much more of it, right?
Right.
And someone like Plotinus is going to say, no, it's completely equivocal, right? Yeah. That when I describe you as wise, the one is not wise in any way at all, the way that you are wise, right? So we're actually, all propositions about the one are equivocal.
Yes.
Well, Thomas is right in the middle, right? He says, no, they're all analogies, right? It's analogical reasoning, right? That when we talk about the divine, we talk about the world beyond this world, or, transcendence world, or whatever, how you want to put it, that the most we can do is analogize, right? And so I think this idea that says, and this goes to the question of something like a paraconsistent logic or a two-truth theory or whatever, is that what philosophers might have to say is, insofar as we know anything about God, or insofar as we know anything about the absolute or whatever, that whatever propositional content we can apply to it at this point, because it is metaphysically so other than our reality, then we can speak about it truly, but only analogically, right? And so I think there's a whole nother track to be had here in terms of talking about the absolute and saying that these are provisional statements that are fundamentally analogical. They're not the rigorous realism that perhaps a philosopher want to have to say, look, logic governs this realm and every possible realm. I mean, that's what possible world semantics are, right? At some level, the idea that you have one logic to rule them all. And that's maybe the case that that's not true or not possible. And it may be the case, right, that we're limited, just fundamentally limited. And Thomas is just right, that when we do philosophy, when we do systematic theology or whatever, we're always engaging in a kind of provisional, it's a provisional truth that is fundamentally analogical. and that if it is true, insofar as it is true, perhaps it'll be revealed to us one day when we die, or we have a beatific vision, like Thomas did, and famously, right?
Yes.
Thomas had his beatific vision and said, "Everything I've written is straw."
Yes.
Right. So